My wife and I bought a house. We got it at a fairly low price. I realize now that this is strange. But at the time I was just happy to buy it and such a low price tag. We have a young family, no children yet, but they are planned. In general, my wife and I moved into a new house, made some repairs, everything was fine, but soon began to be strange. Night. We sleep with my wife in the bedroom, suddenly we wake up from some rumbling, as if something fell. We jumped up on the bed, sitting, listening, there was no more noise, but my wife still kicked me out from under the blanket, say go and look. I reluctantly got up and walked around the house, everything was quiet, nowhere any traces of something fallen did not find, went back to the bedroom, to sleep. After a while the rumbling was repeated, and I could hear it quite clearly and this time I could imagine where it was coming from. I got up and went into the next room. I went in and everything was fine, no objects on the floor that could have created such a rumble. I got mad. What the hell was that? I turned around and was going to go back to sleep, but I felt a kind of draft on my legs and decided that my wife must have opened the window for airing and did not close it. I went to the window, sliding the curtains, and from what I saw behind the window almost to the ceiling jumped up and began to yell at the whole house. A nasty old woman was looking at me from the street with big white eyes. She was so ugly that it looked like she had just died a couple weeks ago. Meanwhile, my wife in the bedroom also started screaming, apparently out of fear, and calling for me. I don't even remember how I got to the bedroom. My wife is sobbing hysterically, mumbling that she wants to get out of here as soon as possible. I was in a panic, too. Anyway, after about 20 minutes I got over what I had seen, pulled myself together and decided to go outside to check what was going on. I took a hammer with me and went out the door, went around, nothing, not even a trace. Then who did I see outside the window? I came back to the house, I calmed my wife down, but that night we never slept. The next day we slept only a little, to tidy ourselves up, to do something. And then it's night again. My wife and I are nervous, we don't want to sleep, we're watching TV. Everything seems fine. And then suddenly the power goes out in the whole house. I went to the hallway to check the plugs, everything was fine. On my way back, I decided to go to the kitchen to get some candles and a flashlight. On the way I looked in the room, my wife was sitting on the couch. I told her that everything was fine with the plugs and I would bring the candles. I went into the kitchen, and there was my wife, rummaging through the chest of drawers. I almost fainted. So I took a flashlight, my wife took some candles, and we went back to the living room. I prayed there was no one there. I didn't tell my wife anything, because if she saw something like that, she might die. I didn't know how I didn't faint. It's a good thing there was no one in the living room. Just when we had set up and lit the candles, the light came on. We put the candles away and decided to go to bed. I couldn't sleep at all. I saw something. At that moment I began to understand why we got this house so cheap. The former owners knew everything that was going on here, but they didn't tell us. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I woke up to the fact that the room was cold and my wife was lying with her back to me. I covered her with another blanket and went to the kitchen to smoke. And here I stand with a cigarette, as my wife comes into the kitchen and asks why I took her to sleep in the living room on the sofa, when she fell asleep next to me in the bedroom. I told her that I did not understand what she was talking nonsense, because 5 minutes ago I covered her with a blanket in the bedroom. In general, we were very surprised and decided to go to the bedroom to check who I was covering. We went to the door and I opened it quietly. What did I see? We had the most disgusting old woman in our bed. My wife and I rushed into the living room like crazy. I called the police, but they wouldn't listen to me at all and threatened me with a fine if I made fun of them like that. So I called some of my friends and explained the situation. They came over and we walked around the house together. They didn't see anything suspicious. My wife told me that she would never stay here and went to live with her mom until I could deal with the situation. I was alone in the house. The first thing I did was to call the former owner of the house. I did. They told me they didn't know anything. I could feel the anxiety in their voice and I realized they were lying. As it turned out later, they had been victims in the house like us, but they couldn't do anything about it and sold the house to us cheaper. The house clearly had a bad past. The next day I called the priest and he, as soon as he stepped outside the house, immediately said that it was not good and advised us to move out. In turn, I advised him to do his work in silence and not to give out advice. He lit up the house and left. To be honest, I really didn't want to test his work that night, but I had to check everything thoroughly. It was scary, so I bought myself some alcohol for courage. In the evening I sat near the TV, drank beer and didn't notice how I fell asleep. I woke up in the night because I wanted to go to the bathroom. I went to the restroom and then I heard a knock on the front door, not in the restroom, but at home. I thought it was my wife. At that moment for some reason I didn't even think about the fact that it was nighttime, probably because of the beer I had drunk. I went to the door, looked through the peephole, my wife was standing there, so I let her in. She went straight to bed and I followed her. I woke up in the morning to a phone call. It was my wife. First thing I asked her was where she was. The answer was, at her mom. I almost sat there, and I rushed out of the house, and almost tore the door off its hinges. I ran out onto the lawn, looked back at the house, and there was this ugly old woman standing there looking at me from the bedroom window. I concluded that after the lighting, I had put her back in the house myself, so I witnessed an unexplained phenomenon. Soon we sold the house for about the same price we had bought it for. Later I learned from the newspapers that the house had burned down and the whole family had died in the fire. Their bodies were found in the pantry. I know exactly who they were hiding from.